Welcome to our Customer Success Leadership podcast. Today, I have the pleasure to receive Rita Romeiro. Rita is a director of customer success. She started her career in consulting, and over the last 10 years, she developed her expertise and her leadership in CS. Good afternoon, Rita. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Hi, Catherine. Good afternoon. My name is Rita Romeiro. I started my career almost 15 years ago in the consulting world, where I did a lot of delivery-related work and also support. And then more or less 10 years ago, I just moved into the startup world, where I really learned all about customer success, namely customer success management. And essentially what I've been doing over the last few years of my career is I've been working and developing frameworks to make sure that we can sustain, create, and even optimize and support the growth of companies going forward. So it's all about how do we create the teams, how do we develop the frameworks, and then how do we optimize over that over time so that we can make sure that companies will get the maximum growth that they can.
Excellent, Rita. My first question for those CEOs who would like to recruit in customer success, what are the skills and qualities that you are looking for when you recruit in your team?
Right. So personally, the first one I always choose is related with proactivity. And this is because, especially the CSM role, we kind of know what we need to do with our customers. We kind of know that we need to touch base with our customers, see what they're doing and all of that. But really, a good CSM makes their own workload, right? It's all those interactions with the clients that are going to tell us what are the next actions we need to take, right? So the more proactive a CSM is, obviously, the more actions they're going to have on their calendar and so on. But all of these actions, they are designed to drive engagement of the client with us. So proactivity is definitely high on my list because we all want to make sure we have engaged customers. And then right after that, the thing that I would look off is around creativity. Right, this element of thinking outside of the box. And this kind of goes hand in hand with proactivity because we want to reach out to the clients, right? And the key thing when we think about reaching out to the clients is we need to make the interactions worth their time, right? So if a client is coming back and talking to us this month, we want to make sure the client comes back and talks to us next month as well. So we need to deliver this value to the client. And there are different ways that we can use to do that. And sometimes there is an element of creativity that needs to go into this because obviously, in some cases, we may have the playbooks that tell us exactly what are the kind of actions we should be doing, but still adjusting that playbook to the client's reality, this ability to think outside of the box and be creative about it is definitely one of the things that's high on my list. Then another thing is an overall attitude of being willing to try and fail. And this is a little bit against what we see growing up. We just want to succeed first thing around because that's kind of like the system in which we grow. Yes. But reality is, if we're willing to try and fail and learn with our mistakes, we can actually learn so much more, right? So is this, obviously we're talking about something trial and fail in terms of doesn't cause catastrophic errors to the client, right? We want something controlled. But what we're looking in here is someone who has this mindset of, I can do better, so I'm going to try something different. And then not only that, but I want to come back and tell everybody about this. Because one of the things I particularly like, one is, obviously I need to promote this kind of mindset in my team, so I need to allow it. It needs to come from above, but I want my team to be the best thing they can be. So learning with mistakes and learning with each other can actually boost them and make them better professionals over time. So this is definitely a skill that I usually look at that. Then also in terms of having a high degree of empathy, of emotional intelligence, because we're working with people, right? We're working with professionals. They have their objectives and their day-to-days, but they're still people in the end of the day, right? So we want to make sure that we can we're not just there to try to push things on them. We're trying to help them. So having this ability to understand, is this the right moment to have this conversation? You know what? I sense that today is not a good day. So why don't we move this maybe to next week when you have a little bit more breathing room? These kinds of things are things that the client really appreciates. So definitely having an element in here of empathy and emotional intelligence for me is something that I would say it's quite high. Then being a diplomatic, being an influencer. Reality is customer success. We are kind of like the glue inside a company in terms of we bring the client concerns and then we need to go around the departments and see who can help us, who is the people who is best placed to support something with the customer. And all of these other departments, they have their own job. They don't need us there, right? They have their own things planned to do and all of that, but we may actually need to bring one of them along with us in the journey because that actually can lead to really good results with the customer, right? So we want to do that. So we need to have this ability to influence, to be diplomatic, and to actually bring people along with us when it comes to working with the customer. And then one that it might be a little bit me speaking due to my experience. And then the final one that I would say, and maybe I'm a bit biased towards this because of my professional experience, but I do think that having a consultative approach to clients is actually an added skill that we can have, because it's very frequent for clients to tell us what they want, but experience tells us that what they want is not always what they need, right? So having this consultative mindset of trying to really dig and get to the root cause of the problem can actually be really useful. And obviously all of these skills can be learned, and you can all learn this with time, but depending on the level of seniority that you're trying to hire for, this would be some of the skills I would look to hire in people.
So practically speaking, you would hire people from what other departments, and do you have any preference?
So I would say that I would hire people essentially from 3 departments with particularly no preference of order, let's say no order in there. I would definitely look for people that have done delivery. I would look for people who have done account management and also customer support. Now, some of these roles may be historically known as being a little bit more reactive than others. But in the end of the day, in my experience, what really matters is the person that you have in front of you. Because even for customer success, reality is a lot of companies call different things to customer success. And only when we talk to the persons and we understand the kind of work that they have really done is when we get to the bottom line of whether their experience is relevant and have they developed the skills that we consider to be important for a certain role. So I would say that whilst I would look for people who traditionally come from these 3 roles, when it comes to hiring someone, it's all about understanding the individual, and through the hiring process, actually understand, do these people have the skills we need for them to do the job, regardless if they have done a more reactive role or a more proactive role. What we want to make sure is that we can find the right fit, knowing our requirements and knowing what are this person's experience, skills, and even objectives moving forward in the future.
Do you onboard people coming from customer success quicker than people coming from these other functions you have described? What has been your experience?
I think once more that comes down to the individual, right? If you have someone who is really switched on, obviously if you have someone from customer success, they may already know the drill, meaning what are the type of procedures you need to do, what is the framework you're following, when you engage with the customer, what are the type of actions that you do with them. So you don't need to go through this almost education process. So in a way, it can be faster. But on another hand, as I said, some people call customer success what I would call being a customer support person, right? So different people call different things. So it's all about, well, have you done this job? And knowing what needs to be done on this one, can you do it or not? And then it also becomes a matter of having almost like a flashcard that tells you, okay, you're going into a meeting with a client. These are the things that can spawn off this meeting, or these are the kind of actions or conversations that you would go with a customer. If we have someone who is looking to do a transition and they're really eager to be successful at that transition, it actually doesn't make a lot of difference if they have done customer support before or not. Because a person that is eager and very committed to that will go above and beyond. They will make sure they study everything. They will probably speak with their managers ahead of the meeting and just try to plan for it. And just be like, right, so I understand that these are the actions and these are the things I can do and all of that. So as long as they're that committed, I think that they can be very successful as well.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know, because I'm sure it will open many opportunities for people who would like to move into this function, right? My second question is regarding the true value that the customer success teams deliver within a company. So how do you demonstrate this true value, Rita? What has been your experience?
So when we talk about value, I like to think about the value in terms of quantitative value, something that we can just put a number, a metric in front of it, but also something that is more qualitative, right? So if you look at the more quantitative ones, obviously we cannot go without talking about revenue. And in that regard, I would make a distinction whether CSMs are, for instance, responsible for expansions and renewals, or if they're just responsible for renewals. If they're responsible for expansion, then I would definitely recommend to look at the net revenue retention, so NRR. And when you look at this metric, what you want to understand is from all the renewals, all the expansions, and also considering churns and downsells, because whether we like them or not, they are natural parts of the business. But how healthy is this metric? And when we look at this metric, important thing, when we look at the net revenue retention, we want to make sure that this metric is above 100%. Okay. And when this metric is above 100%, that means that our expansion, our renewals have offset any potential churn, any potential downsell, right? Which is really where we want to be. The number itself kind of depends a little bit on the targets of the companies, right? And it depends in which stage a company is. But I would say that aiming to have about 20% of growth just with expansions is actually quite good. So if we're aiming to have around 120, we're good. What we never want to have is this being less than 100, because that actually means that you have so much churn, so much downsell that it completely offset any efforts that you have in terms of expansion, which is really not the path where we want to go, because then we need to work harder to actually get to those expansions and revenues. So that would be one metric. Now, for CSMs who don't have anything to do with expansion, which there's still a few, then I would look at the gross revenue retention, so GRR. And when we look at this metric only has in consideration renewals minus churn minus downsells. Okay. Now, this metric at the maximum is 100%, right? It can't be more than that, because we're assuming that we started with a revenue, we ended the year with a revenue, we had no churn. So it's 100%. That's where we want to be. However, churn is a natural part of the business, whether we like it or not. So we should account for some churn. Like good management always accounts for a little bit of churn. How much churn you're going to account, it does depend a little bit on your customer base. For instance, do you have historical clients in a customer base? Have you sold them use cases that you no longer do? And are there better solutions in the market to solve that specifically subset of customers? And are they just with us for historical reasons, but they could actually drop us any moment? That can happen, especially if you are in a startup where things change very quickly. The clients that you had 5 years ago may no longer make sense today. And in most cases, they don't. So there is always an amount of churn that you should account for. That being said, personally, I don't account for more than 10% of churn ever. And if we have more than 10% of churn, I would try to understand with the closed lenses what is going on in there, but obviously ideal, we want to keep a churn lower than 5%, right? Because the way we should look at it is the more churn we have, the more efforts needs to be put in terms of upsells, in terms of new logos, and so on. So we always want to keep the churn low. Personally, one metric that I would not consider in terms of quantitative, since we're talking about that, would be churn. Okay, and the reason for that is because whilst we obviously want to make sure that the churn is lower than a percentage, let's say 10%, CSMs are only responsible for managing the churn. They're not responsible for the number themselves. Okay, and this is quite important to do this distinction, because managing the churn means that we understand the churn, and this is something that CSMs should do, right? CSMs should understand, do we have churn? Why do we have the churn? And have we done everything we could to prevent this churn? This is what we can ask of a CSM, right? But saying that a CSM is responsible for the churn, in my opinion, it's not something I would defend, because the churn, there's so many reasons for churn. It can be because the product was not a right fit for the client. It can be because the product fundamentally doesn't address the problem that the client has, and that was properly digged out in initial stages. Maybe because we had a change in stakeholder to someone who already has an affinity with a different product. So it's not something necessary that a CSM can prevent, right? So whilst it's important that we manage the churn and that we know that churn and we keep tabs on it, I wouldn't necessarily say you are responsible for it. Okay, so just something to have in mind. And I think the final one I would consider in quantitative, which is something that I don't think not every single CSM departments look at it, and for a reason, would be related with the customer lifetime value, right? And this is a metric that is very typically a finance metric. So it's not something that CSM departments typically worry with. But the way that I look at this metric is a good customer lifetime value is good for any company, because a company that is successful, they have a customer lifetime value above a certain value, okay? So how do they have the value above this certain value? Is they keep the customer longer. So the customer keeps on renewing with them, right? So ensuring this number is high is obviously a combination of factors, but one of the factors that CSM can influence is how long does a customer stay with us? And the customer only stays with us in this day and age if we are delivering value to this customer, right? So it's all about, can we deliver this value? If we can deliver this value to the client, then we're going to have a high CLV. And that's a good thing. That's where we want to be. But that being said, this is not a metric that is directly managed by CSM. It's a metric that very typically is managed by finance, which is very important, especially when we are in the series stage and we're looking at the value of the company and all of that. This is one metric that does play a value. So being able to relate the work of the CSM with this is actually really, really important.
Any other metrics that you can think of?
So the other metrics I would go, they're actually a little bit more qualitative. So not so much as metrics per se, but it's more like delivering value in a different manner. One of them is actually the customer health scores. And this is very qualitative, right? Because the customer health scores, they exist to make sure that we understand if we have customers at risk and to help us take actions, but also, do we have any possibilities for expansions, right? So this is fundamentally the purpose of that. CSMs, they know exactly the state of every single customer, right? That's their job, is to know the customers and to understand where we are with customers. But this is what the CSMs do. Sometimes nobody else in the company knows about this. So people don't understand what a CSM does, because a CSM doesn't really have a project to deliver or doesn't really have a ticket to solve, right? So it's kind of like in there. Now, what I have done in the past that actually worked really well for me and my team was I implemented some customer health scores meetings with the senior leadership of my company. So including the chief customer office, the chief revenue officer, finance, product, and even the CEO. And the overall objective of those meetings was to provide everyone with a visibility of where our customer base was. More specifically, with the customers that we were perceiving to be at risk of churning or that needed attention, right? And the overall objective is to make sure that, one, we tell them, they know this is what the customers are doing, but also this is our plan to mitigate this situation. So it would be a conversation in terms of the client is in this situation. This is everything that we're doing. Do you have any comments? And reality is sometimes they may just tell us, okay, that sounds good. Let us know how that goes. And other times they can also tell us, actually, I think I have someone from product who can help you with that. So I'm going to connect you two. So it ended up being in terms of churn. So starting to put that mindset that churn is a collective responsibility, right? CSMs can manage it, but the churn is a responsibility that is of the company. So what can we do as a company to prevent this churn? But also, this is where we are with the customer base. This is all the work we did not know that CSMs were doing that they're actually doing. So in my case, it worked quite well because anyone in the startup scene knows that the couple years that just went past were quite tough in terms of redundancies and so on. And obviously, I'm not going to say that my teams were not affected by that. But reality is that when we give people the awareness of the value that a team is doing, they become a little bit more reluctant to touch certain teams, right? Which is what I experienced. It went to the point of, yeah, we're going through this. We can't really touch you because we understand what you're doing and you kind of need that number of people to manage this client base. So we're just going to look somewhere else because they can actually see the value that we are delivering. So customer success scores for me, it's really up there. Once more, it's qualitative rather than quantitative, but it's up there. And then I think you have other ones like having visibility of the client's white space, because this is something that doesn't always exist. And the white space.
What do you call the white space for our audience who may not know what is a white space?
So I would call a white space essentially is like a matrix that tells us all the products that we have or all the features that our product has and which one of these things does our client have, yes or no. Right? So it's something that just helps us understand for this client, what are the opportunities with our current product that we still have. And you can even add more things in there once more, depending on the product in terms of departments, for instance, all that kind of thing. So it kind of helps you understand what are the potentials within an existing account. These kinds of things, which, as you can see, sounds really important, right? Not always people have visibility about this. Or if they do have the knowledge is going to be in pockets, meaning the CSM working in the account will know about it. Any sales representatives, account managers, or sales executives will know about it, but nobody else outside of that will know about it. Okay, so you have this pocket. Pockets are usually not very good, these silos, because it can prevent you from having other people helping you boost things further. So the more visibility you give about this, the better it is, because you can have people from other departments, you can have marketing coming with campaigns to help boost a certain feature, which may be slowing down interaction with clients. So having this visibility there, known and clearly understood, is quite important, right? And this doesn't always appear. Then other things such as results of customer satisfaction surveys. Like customer satisfaction surveys, in my opinion, I like to issue them after important moments of truth in the customer lifecycle. So for instance, they have done an upgrade or they have went through a renewal. It's great that when they went over that and everything, and the output is a check, like they have upgraded, they have renewed, that's great. But what about the quality of the interaction? Because they may have upgraded, but it might have been a terrible process and the client may not be willing to upgrade again, right? So we want to understand this sort of things so that we can do a better job. And then we also have another thing, which is more in terms of advocates and referrals, which is almost like it's at the top. And in all honesty, it's one of the hardest things to achieve,
I can
which
imagine.
is
Yes.
essentially from our customer base, all the stakeholders we work with, who are our champions, who are the people who will go out of their way to actually talk about us, the word of mouth that we have, and tell this company is great. This product is the best thing since sliced bread. And this is what we want, right? This is really hard to get to this point. And you can always have the silent referrals where people just talk to each other and just say something's really good. When you start engaging with those people, you can actually ask them, so how did you hear about us? Because you just contacted us spontaneously, and they may tell you, oh, it was from such and such company, right? This is something that you would have more if you have a big company. If you have a small company, startup styles, we don't really do this kinds of information collection because we wear multiple hats, so we're just on the go. But if you have someone who is willing to just be a champion and talk to a prospective customer and just tell them, yeah, I'm here. They just asked me to be here so that I can tell you about my experience with this product. Or even someone you can take to a lunch and learn, a webinar within their company, but in a different department, just to tell them firsthand to other potential users what is their experience with the product and how has this product helped them achieve even better business outcomes, right? This would be directly from them. We would just be in the room, just sitting and smiling. We wouldn't have to do anything. So from us, it's great, right? Because this is marketing for us. This is prospective sales for us. It's awesome. But it's also the fact that someone that is not us is telling all these good things about us, right?
Yes.
And they only do that because they're very, very happy, not only with the levels of service they're receiving, but with the business outcomes they're getting from the product. Right. And this is the only way we can get that. And this is something that CSMs can really help boosting by pulling in everybody that needs to be there to help the client feel like that, but also making sure that they continue to receive value from our tool.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I can easily imagine how difficult it is to get these, advocates for a product or a solution. My question now is regarding technology. How has it evolved in customer success with technology? And also, I would ask you the question about AI in customer success, and what do you think of the integration of AI in customer success? And then we will finish with the career path for people who wants to join customer success. So I want you also at the end to discuss about career path. So I'll let you talk, Rita, about technology.
Yeah, so the world of customer success has dramatically changed over the years. I remember when I started doing this 10 years ago, I was an individual contributor back then.
Yeah.
And it was such a different reality, right? At the time, customer success were only there. First of all, it wasn't that structured, right? Customer success kind of emerged from, we need to do something to keep clients engaged with us because loyalty is no longer a thing, right? So that is pretty much how the role evolved. It was from, we can't just train them, we can't just reply to their tickets, and we can't just do a renewal. That doesn't work, right? So we need to do something more. We need to differentiate ourselves from our competition because there's a lot of competition, which is great, right? But how can we distinguish ourselves from that competition? So that's how the role emerged. But that being said, when the role emerged, there was a lot about, let's make sure that we're doing all the right actions to get traction from this client, right? To make sure that the client continues engaged, but not only continues engaged, that they remain and they will get further value from us, right? So it's all about, we did the training. Can you use the application well? Anything I can help you with, right? Shall we talk about how this product is helping you? Anything we can do to improve that? So it was very much classic. In this days and age, it has completely changed. Also, back in the days, we used to have an account manager who used to take care of anything related to the renewals, upsells. So it was like cool. I just need to kind of like put the conversation in motion, and then, oh, you want to talk about new feature? Okay, great. I'm just going to call my account manager, and you're going to take this conversation with them, and it's going to help you with everything about this. Now, this has changed quite a lot, and it seems to me that in a way the customer success managers have been taking some of the responsibilities that were previously within the account managers. So the account manager role, which was quite narrow, was quite wide, has started to narrow a little bit, and the CSM role has started to expand a little bit more.
Yes.
So what I'm seeing these days is that there's more and more companies where CSMs are responsible for renewals and for expansions. So not only just the renewal, but the expansion. This is quite a change, right? We're changing from, we just make sure we keep traction, to we want to keep them engaged. We want to make sure they continue on deriving business value from this. But we're also in a position, because we're there every single day, we have established ourselves as the contributor, we know our product well, we can have these expansion conversations with our customer, so we can actually conduct the deal ourselves. Okay, so we're starting to see a shift into that direction, where CSMs are taking a little bit more of these responsibilities, which historically they were account managers. And they're starting to embed that into their own. So metrics around expansions and retentions, in some cases, are now part of the KPIs on which CSMs are evaluated on, which is quite a change from a few years ago. So I think it's going to continue to evolve like that, precisely because companies are realizing that CSMs have all this knowledge about the customers. They know everything about them because they're there every single day. They know what makes sense to the customer. But not only that, they have managed to establish themselves as someone the client trusts to deliver value to the customer, which is what we want, right? If the client is going to renew, it's not just because they like us, it's because we're actually delivering value to them. And that is something they don't want to change, right?
Yes.
So that's the thing we need to hold on to. Because CSMs can do this so well, the leadership is realizing that maybe we should just start giving more responsibilities. And we're going to focus all our sales representatives who were before doing expansions into pre-sales and just getting prospects and new customers on the door. Because also from a metric perspective, when we talk about an expansion, the value that we add may be relatively low compared to a new logo. And the skill set that a sales representative has is far beyond the skills of just getting an expansion done, right? So they might just do a little shift in here and reorganize people in a different way, also to optimize what they can get from them. Now, with regards to AI, we can't talk about the future without talking about the AI, right? And I look at this. So first of all, I'm a person who likes to see the glass half full, not half empty. So I look at it as opportunities moving forward, right? We should look at CSM as well from the perspective of high-touch CSMs and low-touch CSMs, okay? The difference being a high-touch CSM is someone who is going to be very much engaged with the customer, leading touch points with the customer on a monthly or even bi-weekly basis, to conduct feature request meetings, getting feedback on the product, to present feature spotlights, or even organize roadmap sessions with the client. So it's somebody who is there on a very constant basis with the customer. It's almost like a perk in this day. Right?
Yeah.
Is saying that you have bought the product, let us help getting the best value out of the product with this person who knows all about the product, will understand your business reality, and is going to help you achieve your business objectives. This is what a high touch is. It's almost like a white glove type of service. A low touch CSM is someone who recently has almost been described as being a community manager, right? Meaning is someone who is just in touch with a lot of clients. So whilst a high touch would have a book of business of a certain defined number of customers, which depending on the size, it may not be very big. when we're talking about a community manager, we're talking about 1 to an all, right? That's how it serves. You no longer have dedicated customers. You just have customers who may come to you with questions about a product through a platform, which commonly is a community, and they will ask you questions about that. And you, as a community manager, will answer the questions. You can obviously also connect with other points in the department, but it's a much more, I just help you when you need type of thing, because by opposition to a high touch, I'm just going to make all the information you need available online in my community so that you can self-serve yourself and you can come to me when you can't self-serve yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I would do this distinction. Now, with the high touch accounts, I personally believe that we're still going to continue to see people doing this, precisely because there is a very strong component in terms of the human interaction that goes into this role, about having the person there and interacting with the client and making sure that the client is trying to get the best things, all the white glove service. So we're going to continue to have that. But I strongly believe that we're going to have AI boosting all of these interactions. So for instance, when we talk about a playbook, playbooks exist in some cases, but if we start recording everything into the platform, we can start having AI proposing things and telling us, based on your interactions with this client and based on what I can assess that has been done for clients that have the same characteristics, I think there's an opportunity for expansion with this feature. Or you should do a roadmap session because the last one you've done, it was months ago, so it's time to do it. Or follow up on things. So it's just going to prompt the CSM to kind of like do an even better job than they were doing before. Instead of letting the CSM crunch all the information and try to understand what is the best way to do things. If you do this with the boost of AI, you're pretty much going to do your job more efficiently, right? Because we're going to remove some of the non-value added tasks, if you want to call it that, replace them with an AI that can boost those things for us. And we can focus on the tasks where humans actually add impact to customers. So I think that part is still going to continue. Now, the low touch, I think the low touch is going to change massively, right? Whilst we still need to make sure we have the content for these communities, reality is that probably we're going to have chatbots doing some of the conversations. Chatbots who will be able to start proposing things and start saying, you've done that, okay, here is some information for you. Or I'm going to open a ticket here and there. So we're going to have AI taking a lot of these things and making even the response is going to be faster. Because if the AI can do this, it's going to be an immediate response. We don't have to wait for a person to come and do the job. And we can just even serve a bigger whole. So the number of people we can be able to serve is going to be bigger. And what we're probably going to see is that the self-service itself is only going to improve. So we're going to have a better way to support all of our customers. So yeah, whilst I think that it's all about, in one hand, looking at who manages expansions, retentions, and so on, we're also going to have a high component of AI. I personally think it opens a world of opportunity because we're going to be able to, until a certain extent, we're going to be able to redesign what being a CSM means. We're going to be able to focus on the human aspects of the interaction so that we can deliver even further value to client. And we're hopefully going to remove some of those more manual tasks where the value added by a person is only so much. And we're going to be able to even have more meaningful interactions, even help supporting the growth of a company, because we will be able to do more things and more efficiently. So that's the way I personally choose to look at it. I don't feel threatened at all by it. I think it's a great opportunity. And if something, it's going to help us redesign things and become even better professionals and even support further the growth of our companies.
That is a very positive message, realizing that we are not going to have customer success disappearing to the benefit of AI. Thank you, Rita. Now, my last question is regarding career. There are many professionals who want to join customer success, what are the various career paths? And if you can explain to us, how can someone also go up the ladder in terms of leadership within a customer success team?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I believe that, first of all, if anyone is willing to make the change, it doesn't matter if they come from marketing, it doesn't matter if they come from product, engineering, all that matters is that they're willing to do the work, okay?
Okay, that's a good thing.
It's the first thing. There's obviously things to learn about. We do think that customer success is very fluffy, but in reality, it's not. There's a lot of things, a lot of actions. There's a framework that needs to be followed and all of that. So we need to be willing to adjust to that. It's not just a project we need to deliver. We actually have a lot of things that need to be coordinated and done, okay? Which can be misleading because people sometimes don't realize that there is all of this behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
But as I said, I think that people who come from certain backgrounds have an easier transition. If they come from delivery, support, account managers, is easier. But that being said, I've known of people who've done marketing who have changed for customer success and actually have become extremely successful customer success managers, precisely because they're willing to do the work. Okay. It can be quite misleading, the role of a customer success manager, precisely because the job spec is you need to do all of these things, but it's all a little bit, you need to conduct meetings with the clients, but there's more to it, right? So it's a bit misleading. But if you're willing to do the work and you have a good manager who's going to support your growth, show you the ropes, and tell you what you need to do, it can be done. Now, in terms of the growth within the customer success, traditionally, if you start by the bottom, you always start by managing clients. The level of the clients that you manage kind of depends a little bit on the company that you're with, right? If it is clients that have high touch, low touch, you may start, for instance, on the low touch because you're a little bit more protected, not so exposed to the customer, and you can just grow from there, start with the low touch and then start taking more responsibilities with the high touch customers, and you can get up to, for instance, a senior CSM positions. After that, we could be looking at positions where you're going to start managing other CSMs and coaching other CSMs. So, for instance, you can have a manager of CSM, but you can also have some companies in which you go from senior CSM to head of CSM, right?
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that. It pretty much depends on the size of the company and how established the company is. For instance, a startup may not have a manager of CS, but may have a transition from senior CS to head of CF. Okay, so it's a little bit take it with grain. But the important thing is that when you get to a position where you are a head or a director, there are some skills you need to have mastered already. Okay, and those skills are in terms of managing clients. Obviously, every single kind of client, doesn't matter how they're segmented, you need to know how to manage every single one of them. You need to be very good at managing people, because by then you're going to have a team of people who rely on you. You're going to have people with different levels of seniority who will need different things from you as the head or the director of the function. And also you need to know how to build a function or how to optimize the function, right? So we have these things. If you keep looking up, the next progression can be for a role, for instance, of VP of customer success. And what this role looks like, for instance, you can start taking more responsibilities over departments, or you can start taking more responsibilities over budgets, right? So it depends a little bit on the company, but usually when you have a VP, you would not necessarily have board-facing responsibilities, right? So it'd be something more internal, but you're already starting to prepare yourself for that jump. After that, the traditional chief customer office that we have. However, I've also experienced that depending on the size of your company, especially if it's a startup in the early beginnings, maybe Series A, you may not have a chief customer officer. You may actually have a chief revenue officer, right?
Right.
Slightly different skill set, because whilst chief customer office is trying to make sure that the overall experience that the customer has with us in a post-sales environment is all the same, A chief revenue officer is more looking at revenue and expansions and all of that. So the concerns are slightly different. They're not completely incompatible, and it's a transition that I've known some people to do from a CCO to a CRO. But I think that when you do this transition, you do need to have already a mindset in terms of sales and all of that in a CCO you would not normally have. Okay, but it's a transition that can be done. Yes. And then you can look at other roles after you're a CCO. For instance, you can start looking at more operational type of roles, meaning, for instance, a chief operating officer. And you don't necessarily need to make the transition directly from a CCO to a COO, because it's a bit rough of a transition. You may do the transition with, for instance, a VP of operations here in the middle. But the way to think about it is, if a CCO is responsible for making sure that we have this unified customer experience in a post-sales world, and you're trying to bring this customer centricity, some companies do need this mindset, right? This customer centricity mindset. So the transition to an operations role is a transition that's going to allow you to continue to influence the rest of the company to become more customer centric. Okay, so it's all about what are the other processes, how can I influence the other teams, so that the first thing they keep in mind when they make their decisions is the customer centricity.
Yeah.
So it's something that can be done, and I've been quite fortunate in the sense that I've worked with people who have done these transitions. So I know these transitions can be done. Some are easier than others, but definitely some of them you do need to have a special inclination to take those roles. And the final one I have seen people taking is actually the CEO role. So I've seen people doing all this ladder and getting to the point where they become CEO. So
there you go.
Exactly. So you have, the sky is the limit. That's the way I like to look at this, is that sky is the limit. I think there's a lot of things that depends on what you want to do as a professional. And for instance, if you're going to become a CEO, you need to have quite a financial acumen, right? There needs to be quite a strong understanding of finance. There needs to be quite a good understanding of what it means to manage investors, to manage a board. I don't think it's something that every single person can do, but it is something that is possible, provided that you're willing to do the work. I think if you already have an inclination to this, it makes life easier. But it's the same thing as transitioning to a chief revenue officer, right? There needs to be already an inclination in that sense. So it's all opportunities. I think sky is the limit. Just because we get to a role where we are a director of CSM or where we are a head, it doesn't mean it ends. I think in the end of the day, it's all about what you're willing to do as a professional, what are the work you're intending on doing. And then it's also about being exposed to certain opportunities and try to understand if you would like to take those things as the next step, right? Because opportunities may present itself and you don't have the interest. So
I love the way you put it, and I love your formula. The sky is the limit. I always advise my clients not to be restricting by, self-created limitations. So I really appreciate your insights, Rita. You have really shared a lot with us today, and I'm sure you've been of great help to many people. So maybe we'll see you again on this podcast. And until next time, I wish everyone well. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Catherine, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.